You must be very surprised that I was invited here, because I don't fit in. But you were here pretty fast why I'm here, that I'm not so far away from there where you are. But actually, for a physicist, an atomic physics, a nuclear physics, and further down, you cannot actually expect that I can say something reasonable for you. But I will tell you a little bit about the story, how I come into this other way. It was actually the absolute despair I experienced at the end of the Second World War. It was a terrible experience in my life. And also in a way that you say you cannot trust anybody because you are actually offering to do this and that, and then they misuse you to do something which is terrible. Now, I was not really involved in something very negative in a way, but I was very depressed after the war was ended, that I was treated like a criminal. Also, I had the feeling I have nothing done which was bad, you know, except that one has really, seen many people dying and killed and so on and so on. So I had the feeling I must have a way of education that I can really judge what is right and wrong. And then, of course, you immediately think you have to become a scientist and even further a physicist. Because the physicists, you know, they are very proud of their knowledge, right? They say, oh, finally, there are people who really know what is right and what is wrong and don't have to talk in this fussy way and with other people have to live with, right? So that was actually the situation. But when I started actually to go into this field, I was in contact with Werner Heisenberg's new theory, you know, which was in a way a revolution, so to say, at that time. And I was very interested to go into that. And so I listened to many of this kind of demonstrations in school to see what it is. But I didn't understand it. So I took it several times, and I even understood it more. And that, in a way, attracted me, you know, something which one doesn't understand. Later on, you know, after I learned it, I really see it was surprising about it. Werner Heisenberg, with whom I then later on worked 20 years together, you know, he always said, when I gave a lecture about the new theory, the modern theory, and I asked the people, did you understand? And they say yes, then I'm very depressed because that they haven't understood. But if they said, no, we don't understand it at all, well, then you are very close to that, what I want to say. Indeed, it is a kind of a very different approach of that, and it is paradoxical in this way. But it was actually the contribution of Heisenberg together with Niels Bohr that they found in order to get rid of the paradoxes, you in a way had to redefine science in a very different way. And if you do design it, you actually see that it is very different. It is very different. In fact, it turned out that what I actually intended to learn was something where I've been sure that is, and it is in a particular way. And that's the reason I spent 60 years actually thinking about what holds the world together and to get a language there which also is able, to explain, you know, how everything is connected. And the result at the end was, many people asked me what was so exciting about. It was that matter doesn't exist. And everybody said, my goodness, the poor boy, 60 years on something, you know, and day and night and so on. And then he has to hear that matter doesn't exist. No, it was not so bad. It was actually the opposite, that I realized there is something in the background which we simplify to an extent that we had the feeling we could know what is right and wrong, right? And I was not really depressed to say, even the physicists do not know what's right and wrong. Because if they would know, then they would believe that what they know, they could, in a way, dictate the world in which direction to go, right? And I said, I don't want to have the future of our universe, of our Wirklichkeit, as we say in German, depend on us. I mean, that would be terrible. By the way, the word Wirklichkeit is only in German there, and it was actually invented or introduced by Meister Eckhart in the late 13th century. In Wirklichkeit, I have not a translation into English. In contrast to reality, which is real, is res, is a thing, something which I can grasp, you know. Wirklichkeit means there's nothing to grasp. It is something which is continuously changing, and so you have no chance about it. It turned out that this, in a way, came up in the back of it. Now, I went actually then in this direction, and I was very, very fascinated to be in a different world, which was, I mean, not paradoxical in its new interpretation. 1925, it was then Heisenberg, when he was in Helgoland, he was a little bit sickly and so on, so he played around. He got the idea which actually opened the new way of thinking. So sometimes it's important that you get sick because you get to a better idea than if you believe, I know everything, you know. If you're sick, you say everything gets a little bit touchy. So you get closer to it, to that, what is actually in the background of it, right? And Heisenberg, he was a very young person at that time, 24 years old, when he actually found that out. And he told me later on, you know, I mean, how that was when he found the new interpretation. That he said, you know, what actually was the nicest part when I experienced that and found that was that I discovered that the pianist and the physicist is the same, because he was indeed, he was a wonderful pianist, but that was what he did at home, and physics wasn't that in the institute, that he feels it was the same. He was an artist, physicist, and if you would have listened to when we had a discussion, you would have never guessed that we both were physicists, because we're telling each other stories, because we say that's the only way you can get close to that, what you actually have to accept in this case. But he said then too, you know, when I looked back again, I would say that the pianist was first there and the physicist was afterwards. Because when he said, I had the feeling I hear the song, but I cannot write it, you know. And when I came back then to my friends and explained, I have discovered something which must be the right thing because the right result came out. Then he wrote it down, and after he had written it down, nobody said, bravo, what is that so important? I mean, that looks like cheating or with multiplication and so on, right? And he said, no, it's not. And then he sat on the piano and played it. And then the song came back and said, no, it's right. I want just to indicate that physics, because in its present complexity, it is not in that sense complex. When it has found out that it actually leads to that we have to rethink, we have to learn to think in a completely different way. And this you haven't observed now, because in school you still talk 19th century physics and so on, because we don't want the people to be sad about that if they are adult, they are not really the kings of the empire and so on, right, in this case. And it's still there that we are in this kind of in a way of a funny situation, you know, which is actually using actually the thinking of the 19th century, but what is already there, you know, in technology and so on, is already the result of the new thinking, right? Yes, and now we try to organize the future with the old thinking and the new industry around it. What I mean by new industry is there are many things you don't understand. I see many people rolling around like this here, you know, with a cell phone, right? And ask them, what are you doing? I have a telephone call with my friend in Paris. But you cannot do it, you have no strip. No, I have a cell phone. Yes, but how does it work? I don't know. Well, but everybody likes it. Haven't you thought about it? I mean, what it actually is. It's too complicated. There are people who know it, right? Yeah, indeed. But if you really think about it, then you say, probably it is, I learned there's an ether out there, you know. It has a vibration, and the vibration of the ether gives what we call light, and it has different frequency, and that is one of the frequency which is there. Yeah? I said, yes. You come very close, but you know Einstein got his Nobel Prize because he found that the ether doesn't exist. So what is vibrating is nothingness. I say it's impossible, nothingness and vibrating. You know, we have to learn this kind of things, and then of course you get tired to ask more. You say, well, I mean, I don't want to think about it. It makes me depressive that I'm stupid to do that. No, you're not actually stupid, but you have learned that it is all a little bit complicated. Now, I just mentioned this kind in which way I got into this other world, which indicated that suddenly we have an easy way that the different researches which we have, I mean, physics and biology and so on, suddenly could be explained with the same interpretation. And it goes further, that all the religions suddenly became part of that, right? And not in the way that now the religion become similar to physics, but the opposite, that physics became similar to biology and also to religions. But everybody made the mistake that they believed there is a definite answer to that, right? And the physics saying the classical physics is correct, that was the simplification, which turned out to be not the case. But in a certain way, also the religions have this kind of thing. In order to get closer to it, you want to hold it fast and say it is like this and that, right? And in this way, you destroy actually what is behind. Now, I just only say that in the background of it, I mean that usually I'm talking long and too long and very too long about this transition, because it is very, very exciting after you have come in, because you can explain a lot of things, and you can also explain that we have no reason whatsoever to fight each other, because we are actually the same thing, only looked from another point of view. So we have to learn that. So I always say, and here I'm very much involved in, I've asking for years, you know, about what can we do that we can avoid wars? Because the war is not a possible answer if you disagree on something. Because with the existence of the atomic bombs and so on, we cannot afford it. We have to find another way, I mean, to solve the problems, right? So in this way, we need this kind of a language which says none is there who can say, I tell you what is right. And I immediately thought of the physicists. We had to give it away. but they have a hard time to give way because, you see, well, I mean, the people who live like that here, you know, I mean, they don't know, they don't understand what the world is around them, right? You know, because they are in a place, an empty, in a prison, you know, and only know very much, you know. Without instruments, we will never understand the world. And then they say, and the reason is because the world is completely different, you know. And then he talk about what he has observed with his instruments and so on, right? Now, of course, he is right in saying that, but he did not realize that he sits in a prison as well. And actually, the prison in which scientists sit, they are much more narrow than the one when you walk through woods and so on and look around and see the birds and the plants and all of that, and you get happy and all that, you know, and you disagree with somebody who made this walk with you and say it doesn't matter. I mean, we pick out what we like most at first, and the other ones we imagine then in addition, in a way. And it is so different. The physicists or the scientists say, what I have measured is really what is there, right? So I will not really go on this further because I have been given the topic nuclear power and energy hunger. And this has something to do with very practical things. My wife would be very happy if I give talks about, you know, which you really can understand. I say, all right, yeah, that's true, that is important. But for me, it is very important, I see also the background of it. That the background gives you another way to accept it, why you can be successful. For example, that peace is possible. Now, that peace played such an important role for me was that when I was in California, I had given a position there, and I want to get my PhD there. I looked for a professor who would take care of me and help me and on, and that was Edward Teller. Edward Teller did not mean for me anything, right? I only knew when I saw him the first time he spoke German, and I found out he was a student of Werner Heisenberg, 1930 in Leipzig. I said, isn't it wonderful? I want to go to Heisenberg, and now I'm in California, you know, and I get to somebody who is a student of Werner Heisenberg. Isn't that wonderful? But it didn't last so much, so long, to say it is wonderful, when I discover that Edward Teller was the father of the H-bomb. Because I didn't know that it was that. But it was February 54, you know. I come in the institute and they celebrated something. It's like, what are you celebrating? Well, did you hear? Did you hear? We've got a boy. I said, and he, who is the father? We all? I said, how do you do that? He said, didn't you read the newspaper? That was the bikini bomb exploded up there, which turned out to be 2,000 times more powerful than they actually expected it. You can understand how much I was frustrated by that. That I see, I wanted to do something, to understand it, you know, and be very happy about it. See, more is in a way connected to each other. And then I have, as a professor, just next to me, I mean, who is building a hydrogen bomb, a Russian fusionsbomb. I mean, the one which is much more powerful than that. I was upset because I said, that is exactly not what I want, right? And I immediately talked to him and said, Dr. Teller, why are you building bombs at all? He said, Hans-Peter, we are in a very good situation at present to have peace on Earth forever. If the best one are militarily the strongest one and are capable to be in the future doubly as strong as the rest of the world, then we have peace forever. You can understand. I mean, I thought he was joking because, I mean, an adult person saying such nonsense, you know. I said, well, I'm coming just from wars and all that, and you say only the power with weapons is a guarantee for for peace. It can't be. I tell you, up to date, there is still this kind of thinking about. I just 2 weeks ago in 2 weeks ago in Munich, there was a meeting of the Security Congress, how we can become secure. And the answer was we need to have more power weapons in order to be sure to have absolute protection. Well, anyway, this is a little bit the background of me. And now I actually want to go there, but I actually, was asked to talk about it, which is actually connected with that, because I, in this way, was very closely related to the people who were building the bomb. I did not really separate from Teller because I was not really connected from the subject matter. I worked with antimatter, something quite different. But in a way, I learned about how nice people can be who are building bombs. You know, there is some kind of a, you know, and they told me a little bit about their history, you know, how they said, to build a bomb was for them a sweet problem, a sweet problem, a sweet problem. Because everybody said it is impossible to do that. No, it's a sweet problem. I like a sweet problem. I will show that this can be done, you know. And then they go on and build these weapons, and when it worked out fine, they celebrated it. And then a couple of weeks later, when the bombs were dropped on Japan, they were shocked and say, we didn't know that 100,000 people died because of our bomb. I mentioned that because we have to be very careful with people who are these experts, because everything has become so difficult, you know, that we are forced to go to a very small case in which we do. And of course, we know everything which is in there, but we lose the contact that there is more than that problem, which you are actually participating in that. And that is a problem also we have when we try our education to change. What we do wrong is that young people, we ask them to know a lot of things, this and that, this question and answer, and the answer and so on. They have no time to think about what the question means and how it is actually occurring in nature and so on, and making this this connection to it, right? We are not going into a century of knowledge. It is not knowledge, it is just collecting data, you know. But we need people who have not only have knowledge, but know that knowledge is only a kind of a simplification of that, what we want to do to understand how everything is actually connected, in which also the modern physics has given the answer in which way it goes. Now, I will also say, to tell you, what was my connection actually that I had to do with medical people. Because when I was in the United States,